Bien. Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por acudir a esta invitación de la Escuela de Organización Industrial. Vamos a desarrollar esta sesión combinando los dos idiomas en los que habitualmente trabajamos en la escuela, español e inglés. Y permítanme darles a todos la bienvenida. Particularly, I want to give my warmest welcome to our school, to Taleb Rifai. Thank you very much, Taleb, for accepting our invitation today. Y a todos ustedes, por supuesto, la bienvenida también. Veo personas, amigos, muchos amigos del sector turístico español y personas muy importantes de este sector. Le doy la bienvenida a todos, al vicepresidente ejecutivo de Exceltur, al secretario general de la Confederación Española de Hoteles y Alojamientos Turísticos, a otras relevantes personalidades del sector turístico, autoridades también del Ministerio y a todos ustedes, profesores, alumnos, personas, amigos interesados en la EOI. Antes de presentar la conferencia por parte de Taleb, me gustaría dar algunos datos sobre la Escuela de Organización Industrial, sobre todo porque algunos trabajando en el sector turístico quizá en estos años no han tenido muchas noticias sobre cómo ha evolucionado esta escuela. The EOI is a public foundation, depending on the Ministry of Tourism, Industry, Tourism and Commerce. And it was the first business school in Spain since 1955. It is also the first Spanish school in environmental education since 1976, and also the first Spanish business school in Latin America since 1992, and the first Spanish business school in online training since 1997. And now we can consider the EOI as the European benchmark school in training entrepreneurs. In its 56 years of existence, our school has trained more than 55,000 students in Spain in business management, in sustainability and entrepreneurship. And we can say that one of the most remarkable Spanish CEOs and entrepreneurs have been a part of our school and are now a part of our 5,000 club of alumni, former students of the EOI. Por lo tanto, una escuela con una larga tradición en la formación de emprendedores en nuestro país. But we have continued working, and in 2010 we have improved our results even under these difficult circumstances that we're living today. And we have trained more than 5,000 students. And we have done this with different programs funded by European financial funds, but also with other programs that we call in company, because our programs where we develop an on-site training in a lot of Spanish companies, one of the most important private and public institutions in our country. Y también me gustaría decirles algo más sobre el modo de trabajar de la escuela en estos últimos años. No son solamente números lo que podemos presentar como institución, pero también podemos señalar que la Escuela de Organización Industrial, desde que aprobó su plan estratégico en el año 2009, ha hecho un esfuerzo importante por convertirse en algo que podríamos denominar una red de talento. Una red con un impacto significativo en los medios, especialmente en las redes sociales. Tenemos muchos seguidores en estas redes. We have now more than 15,000 followers in social networks, en Facebook, en Twitter, en LinkedIn, and Also, we have developed during the last year a significant number of events, 300 events in different areas, and we have had the presence of important personalities from different economic sectors. For example, I like to remember the presence here in the school of Joy Ito very recently, the director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Media Lab, and also the participation of our school in very important events and fairs like for example, CIMO Network or Net Impact event, with the participation of our students that have conducted entirely this participation of the school in these events. Lo importante para nosotros es que a través de estas relaciones, a través de este trabajo y de todas estas actividades, nos hemos empeñado en convertir la escuela en algo más que una escuela de negocios. Hemos querido que con la colaboración activa de los antiguos alumnos de la EOI y con toda esta red de participación de distintas entidades, pudiéramos construir una comunidad de profesionales, empresas interesadas en mejorar el valor de sus negocios, en lanzar nuevos proyectos, en definitiva, en emprender en España. We consider now that the school is very focused on the idea of entrepreneurship. It's one of the most remarkable features today of the Spain School for Industrial Organization. Y ahora viene la pregunta, ¿por qué desde la Escuela de Organización Industrial hemos decidido poner en marcha este MBA, este Executive MBA en turismo? ¿Por qué hacerlo? ¿Por qué hacerlo ahora? Y me gusta en este punto traer a la memoria de todos los asistentes una discussion, we have largely discussed in the tourism sector during the last years about the strategy for the next year, a long-term discussion that we have called el Plan de Turismo 2020. And at that time when we have discussed all of these, we have all in the sector agreed about the need that the tourism sector had of more talent. Una cuestión que discutimos entonces y que sigue vigente hoy en día. El sector turístico, creíamos entonces, creemos ahora, necesita atraer y retener talento. También la Escuela de Organización Industrial tuvo su propio plan estratégico en 2009, como he comentado, y en ese momento vimos también que podíamos hacer de la idea del talento y el emprendimiento la diferencia, el elemento diferencial de nuestra escuela respecto de otras escuelas de negocios. Está claro que cuando hablamos de nuevas oportunidades de negocio en España, no podemos obviar el sector turístico. Y esto a veces, de puro obvio, no es tan conocido. Creemos que el sector turístico no es solamente una de las actividades más importantes desde el punto de vista económico en nuestro país, sino también una actividad que ha mostrado una gran capacidad para seguir compitiendo y creando riqueza y empleo en circunstancias muy difíciles. Por lo tanto, new opportunities to business in our country, tourism sector. It's obvious that it's unimaginable, unthinkable not to consider the tourist sector as one of the main fields for developing a new business project, for undertaking a professional career. Pero al mismo tiempo, como decíamos en Turismo 2020 cuando discutíamos de aquellos temas, el sector turístico tiene muchos retos por delante. Seguimos pensando que tiene muchos retos por delante. We are very happy with the figures that the tourism sector has shown during this year and the recovery that is showing. Pero a pesar de esa recuperación y de esas cifras positivas, el sector turístico español necesita abordar retos muy importantes. And we can sum up in a unique idea all these challenges. The idea of competitiveness. We need to improve the competitiveness of our tourist sector, improving the added value of the business, keeping the appeal of the Spanish tourism products and destinations that are facing a fierce competition, creating new supplies for new and more demanding customers, enlarging the possibilities of business growth, and as a consequence, enlarging the number of quality jobs. Por lo tanto, esos retos del sector para más valor añadido, para crear más riqueza, para crear un trabajo de más calidad, también necesitan ser abordados. Y realmente volvemos a la idea inicial, pensamos hoy como pensábamos entonces, que the driving force, el elemento clave para poder conseguir ese futuro mejor para el sector es traer más talento al sector turístico, más innovación en el sector turístico. We really think that we need more innovative, more skilled, more committed people, more and better professionals willing to develop their ideas in the tourism companies or having simply the will to create new companies based on innovation, technology and sustainability, the three ideas of our MBA. La idea, por lo tanto, sería permitir que el sector turístico pueda hacer su contribución a esa red de talento en la que hemos querido trabajar en la Escuela de Organización Industrial y al mismo tiempo proporcionar a las empresas del sector las oportunidades que la escuela tiene en materia de formación y en el desarrollo de otros programas financiados con fondos europeos. ¿Cuáles serían los elementos diferenciales de este máster? Me dirijo ahora a posibles personas interesadas en participar en este MBA. Tenemos ya, por cierto, bastantes solicitudes. Queremos elegir a los mejores para el número de plazas que tenemos en este Executive MBA y creemos que el elemento diferente de este programa respecto de otros que pueden existir en el sector tiene que ver precisamente con la idea de emprendimiento. Es ahí donde queremos diferenciarnos en la escuela y en este programa de turismo. Queremos enseñar a ser emprendedores a nuestros estudiantes, emprendedores con un conjunto de valores, de gestión sostenible y, desde luego, aprovechar las metodologías que ofrece la escuela basadas en un aprendizaje muy práctico, learning by doing, a través de la experiencia, del conocimiento práctico y, desde luego, de un uso intensivo de las tecnologías en nuestras aulas, incluso fuera de nuestras aulas, ya que la Escuela de Organización Industrial es la primera escuela también en introducir el mobile learning en nuestro país, con el que trabajan todos nuestros estudiantes y profesores. Desarrollar a lo largo de este programa la idea o los conceptos de innovación aplicada a proyectos concretos de negocio para el desarrollo y la diferenciación de productos, servicios y de la propia empresa. Como he dicho, una utilización intensiva de las herramientas tecnológicas más avanzadas y de las redes sociales. Acabamos precisamente en el Consejo Asesor de este programa de estar hablando sobre estas redes sociales, social network, y cómo cualquier persona que en este momento desee desarrollar un proyecto de empresa en cualquier sector, desde luego en el sector turístico, tiene que contar con esta realidad. Por supuesto, abordarlo todo ello desde esa visión internacional o global que es inexcusable para las actividades económicas y empresariales en nuestro país. Y específicamente, junto con los aspectos troncales en este programa, abordar una formación en profundidad desde el punto de vista operativo de las habilidades necesarias para trabajar en el sector turístico, pero hacerlo uniendo esta iniciativa y sus contenidos a las nuevas oportunidades, a lo que podemos adivinar que va a ser el futuro de este sector estratégico que nosotros pensamos nacerá este futuro de éxito de la capacidad de desarrollar precisamente modelos de negocio basados en la innovación, en la creatividad, en lo que podríamos llamar la nueva economía, con contenidos y participantes muy cerca de las necesidades del mercado. Para esta iniciativa hemos contado con el apoyo de muchas personas del sector turístico, por supuesto de la EOI, que van a participar en este máster, y especialmente de un consejo asesor. Y bueno, quería dar especialmente las gracias a todos los que nos estáis ayudando a poner en marcha esta iniciativa, y especialmente a las empresas e instituciones que han aceptado ser parte de este consejo asesor. Thank you to all the members of our advisory council for their participation and for their collaboration, because we are absolutely sure that we are going to help the school in order to keep this program and its students very close to the market needs. And particularly, we feel absolutely honored for the presence in this advisory council of the maximum authority of the tourism sector worldwide, Mr. Taleb Rifai, and a very remarkable expert in this sector. Taleb Rifai, General Secretary of the World Tourism Organization since 2010. He was before Deputy Secretary General of the World Tourism Organization from 2006 to 2009. And before this, he was the Assistant Director General of the International Labour Organization from 2003 and 2006. But prior to this appointment in the World Tourism Organization, Mr. Rifai served in several ministerial portfolios in the government of Jordan as Minister of Tourism and Antiquities, Minister of Information, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation. So I would like to say that Taleb Rifai is not only now the current maximum authority in the tourism industry worldwide, but I think is a recognized expert in this sector and a very respected person for his experience, for his talent, and above all, for his extraordinary human quality. Thank you very much, Taleb. Floor is yours.
I was told I have to switch this on.
Okay, perhaps we need the help of someone here. Thank you very much. Okay.
Now it's working. Thank you so much, Amparo, for your very, very kind words. Buenos dias. And I truly wish I could move so swiftly between Castellano and English as you so skillfully do, but I apologize. I think you would really not be able to bear with me 5 minutes if I speak in Spanish. So please forgive me, and I hope that in the spirit of internationalism, you would accept me speaking in a language that is not your own beautiful language. I also must thank you so much, Amparo, for including me in this wonderful setting. As member of the advisory board, I'm very honored. And on a personal note, it brings me back to something that was very dear to my heart. Over 24, 25 years of my life, I used to be a university professor, not in tourism, but those are the best years of my life. So to be back in an academic environment is, to me, an honor and a privilege. I'm also very happy to have and see here some very good friends. Jose Luis and many of the familiar faces here make me feel a little bit better about this. So thank you for having me, and I'm humbled in the presence of all of this wonderful group of people. What I would like to do in the few time that I was assigned to speak to you is give you a snapshot of the global overview of where we are in this industry. I know that what I may say may not be directly relevant to each and every path of your specialization or your area of interest, but it is important to see the forest and not just the trees. And it's very important to have the big view so that we could all place our specific areas within the bigger view. And I hope I will succeed in the coming few minutes to share with you where we are and where are we heading. But to start with, I must say that to be here is at the core of our mission. The development of human resources is an absolute priority to UNWTO. After all, tourism is really about people. People make it, people receive it, and people enjoy it. And without the people that make it happen, which are going to be part of this wonderful setup, it will never happen. We have, as a matter of fact, a very important setup in the north of Spain, between Spain and France, in the small principality of Andorra, a foundation there called the Temes Foundation, which carries out the academic work and the training and the educational responsibility of UNWTO. And one of the ideas that I would like to discuss with you is how we could actually cooperate to bring people on a global level to that. We receive so many students, volunteers, and trainees to Andorra. Of course, we bring them to Madrid all the time. Madrid is our home. We cannot abandon that. But we're so not too far away after all. But let me turn now to the main topic of my presentation today. What has the last decade done, not just to our industry, to our sector of tourism, but to an entire way of life? It was a fantastic decade for those of you that would want to just stop and think about it. From the year 2000 to the year 2010, we have just left behind 6 months ago. The world has changed around us in undistinguishable ways. We started the decade with one of the most dramatic events that mankind have ever seen, September 11. And you are quite aware of the impact of that, not only on our sector and our industry, which was tremendous, but our entire way of life, the way people move around, the way people think about themselves and others. Then we passed through a series of tsunamis, earthquakes, hurricanes, wars, terrorism, attacks. And then the decade did not finish before delivering to us one of the most serious and difficult economic crises that mankind has ever seen in the last 50, 60 years ever. It was such a dramatic decade. And it was only yesterday, it was only in the year 2000 that we started this. But in spite of all of this, and in the midst of what should be seen as all the reasons for people traveling and for tourism to retreat, quite the opposite happened in a remarkable and strange way. In the year 2010, 919, almost 920 billion US dollars were generated through travel. Almost $1 trillion. If we add to them the expenditure and the receipts from the transportation, particularly aviation, we are over 1 trillion. This figure is without the transportation cost. And 940 million people crossed international borders in 1 year. And that was not supposed to be a good year because it came after 2009, which was a disastrous year for tourism. We are expecting that before the end of 2011 and towards the beginning of 2012, we will hit the mark of 1 billion people crossing borders per year. If you add to that about 4 billion estimated as making domestic trips, just to give you an idea, in China alone, in the year 2010, there was 2.1 billion domestic trips registered. We are talking about an incredible growth and an incredible movement, more like an explosion of human activity that defied all the challenges and all the difficulties of a very, very difficult decade. Domestic tourism, which accounts to 4 to 4.2 billion trips per year, was seen to grow tremendously big in countries, as I said, like China, Brazil, Spain, within Europe, within the United States. it was remarkable. But more important are the effects on the overall economy. It is estimated that 5 to 5.1% of world GDP is from direct, I underline direct, contribution of tourism. If you add the indirect impacts of tourism on other sectors, like food, like manufacturing, like many, many other sectors that are transportation, many others that are very strongly connected, we're talking about a much higher figure, approaching 8.5 to 9%. But 5% of GDP is from tourism, and over 30% of world exports in services are from tourism. More importantly, it represents 1 over 12 jobs in the world, direct jobs. And this is collaborated by our data from the World International Labor Organization. It is incredible how this industry has grown, and particularly in the last 10 years. Yet the potentials of industry are being slowly realized and are slowly emerging. The world is not yet quite aware about the size of this, what I would very clearly call a human revolution in moving around. People have started to move, and there is nothing that is going to stop them. And there are several reasons why the world is not yet able to come to terms with this. One is that our industry, our sector, is a very fragmented sector. It's very horizontal. So many sub-factors inside it. The hospitality industry, the transportation industry, the direct services, the tour operators and the likes. Every other kind of service that is connected to it is difficult to comprehend. And therefore, it is even difficult for it to be seen or speak or represent itself as one. And sometimes even within the sector, there are very many competing elements out of that. Let me go back now to the issue of this decade that started with September 11, just to highlight some of the changes that may have came out of this industry. People thought that the travel industry would come to a halt after the major markets that receive and send visitors in North America and Europe, particularly in North America, had came to a very, very serious retreat. But in spite of that, the industry grew tremendously. There are 3 issues that I would like to highlight on the changes. One is absolute exceptional growth of this industry. Just to give you an idea, in the year 2000, we had 680 million people crossing international borders. In 10 years, that grew up to 940. Over 40%, 35 to 40% growth only in 10 years. The receipts are even more impressive. We almost doubled. In the year 2000, it was about 480 billion US dollars. Now it's about 920 billion US dollars. So the growth is a very important factor there. But the second important factor there is the changing in the geopolitics and the geography and the shift in the center of gravity of this industry as following the shift in the economic and political spheres. I mean by that, the emergence of the new destinations as source markets has been remarkable. Without doubt, growth in the last 10 years have been led not by the traditional mature destinations in Western Europe and North America, but rather by the emerging economies. The world has opened up. There is no place in the world that you cannot visit anymore, and there is no place in the world that is not declaring itself open for visitors. Now, we think that this is easy. We take it for granted, but this is not something that is more than 10 to 15 years old. There were many, many places around the world that were unvisitable 15, 20 years ago. So the world has opened up, and the destinations have started to compete, and the new worlds have come into play in a very, very strong way. Today, we believe that probably travel and tourism represents the largest ever transfer of funds, of capital, from the rich to the less rich, from those that have it to those that don't have it, from those that are willing to spend it willingly to those that are receiving it very happily. It's absolutely the largest transfer of funds, of voluntary funds, from one world to another world, from the north to the south if you want, or from one society to another. But the center of gravity is moving east very clearly. Asia is a major, major winner in all of this. Let me show you also another very important slide and indicator to show you that in the year 2000, only 38% of world tourism went to emerging markets or to the developing world. Today, it's almost 50-50. It's 47%. So the market share is moving towards the emerging destinations. And of course, the consequence is that Europe and North America are losing market shares. They're not losing numbers. They're not losing leadership. They're not losing in nominal terms, but they're losing in percentage terms, which is not so bad. I think it's a more fair, a better distributed benefits and wealth, and a more equitable form of globalization. China, for example, that I referred to, in the year 2010, exported 56 million tourists. And I was in China 10 days ago. And I was told by the Chinese operators and officials that although they know that their demand from Europe is dropping, the demand from the West is dropping, in the first 6 months of 2011, the inbound tourism to China grew only by 1%. Yet, their outbound grew in 6 months 18%. 18%. And they were quite okay with it. I was speaking to the minister and telling him, you must be under a lot of heat. For a minister that is having a deficit in trade with regard to tourism, you must be criticized by your own people. He said, to the contrary. Our government is encouraging more people to travel. More Chinese travel, more connections between East and West, more people know about us. The more we contribute to keeping the operators in Europe alive, the more we will have Europeans when time becomes better. So there is a very long-term strategic perspective on this, and they know exactly what they do. But the third and very, very important change, the first change, of course, is the tremendous growth. The second change is the emergence of the new destinations. And the third very important change that happened in the last 10 years was technology. And I did catch the last end of a discussion in the advisory board on the issue of technology. Today, it's incredible. And what happened, of course, is a reflection of the growth and the development and the advancement on the whole IT industry, the network, the web, and the social media. But not today, from the moment we book a trip to the moment we return home, technology has revolutionized our visitation and our journey altogether. And we better come to terms with it. And we better ride over this very wild horse of technology before it steps over us. Who could have imagined that the mobile phone, not only 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but only 5 years ago, could be used to buy air tickets, to check in and pick up a boarding pass, search and book holidays, check the weather, buy tickets for any tourism attraction, download a city map or a city guide, uploads photographs, and then when you go back home, rate your stay, share it with friends, and spread it to the whole world. All of that is happening now from a small little gadget. And it's revolutionizing our industry in unthinkable and unimaginable ways. In addition to that, even on the infrastructure and the operational part, e-visas, air ground traffic and handling, border control, hotel management, GDSs, waste reduction, energy efficiency technologies, all of those have revolutionized the way we manage and we operate our industry. And all of that happened in the last 10 years, primarily. So where are we now? Where is international tourism in 2010 and 2011, and where is it going? We have solidly recovered from 2008 and 2009. 2009 was one of the worst years we've ever had. For the first time in 60 years, we went down by 4% as an industry. The indicator here, of course, is primarily international tourism travel. It is not a very encompassing indicator, but it is an indicator that has proven to be a good representation of the state of the industry so far, in awaiting better and more detailed indicators which we can and are producing as we go along. 2010 was excellent. Arrivals and growth went up almost 7%. And in the first 6 months, 7 months, even without accounting for all the effects of summer in the northern part of this hemisphere, we grew up by 5%. Now, the remarkable news in 2011 was the surprise that Europe, that did not so good in 2010 and was under and below world average, did above world average in 2011. Europe grew by about 6%, which is 1 point above the world average, while growth in the East, and especially in Asia, slowed down a little bit. Now, these are very, very interesting trends to look at. We know that the effects of the tragic events in Japan have affected Asia and much of what is east of us, but definitely some of the stimulus and some of the signs of recovery in some of the traditional destinations in Europe had shown back. After tabulating the results of summer, this picture may be altered a little bit, but we are still seeing an impressive performance for Europe, and that is good news for the whole world, because Europe still represents about 50%, 55% to be precise, of world tourism, both inbound and outbound. And if Europe is in good health, then the world of tourism will be in good health. Now, also, one must take into account some events that we should be very careful about not feeling so deceived about. The redistribution of traffic that resulted from the events in North Africa and the Middle East, and that will continue, boosted some of the figures and the numbers, particularly in Southern Europe and in the Northern Mediterranean. Spain is a case in place here. These cannot be depended on as long-term accomplishment, but they do play into the picture. And once and when, because it is already happening, some of the North African destinations are recovering. We're already seeing some signs of recovery, particularly in Egypt, less so in Tunis, then the figure may change and be altered a little bit. Some of the events that happened in North Africa and the Middle East and will continue are and must be monitored quite carefully. Europeans are now becoming interested again in seeing what is happening and what is new about these new destinations. And there is something here that I must say from my position heading an international organization, that we should be extremely, extremely careful politically about this, in making sure that we see the recovery of Egypt, Libya, Tunis, and many others as healthy, good, and something that we should encourage. And we should never fall into the trap of living off other people's problems. What's good for my neighbor is good for me. This is a rule that works in tourism. And the more people come to the Mediterranean, the better everybody is. The Mediterranean basin is about 1/3 of world tourism. Over 320 million people come to the Mediterranean basin every year. That's almost 1/3 of world tourism. And it is qualified to take some more. Now, in spite of all these positive trends, except of course for our friends in North Africa and the Middle East, and by the way, the Middle East had dropped in the last 6 months about 11%, and North Africa about 13%, all in all. It's a very strange mix in the Middle East. You have a drop of 11%, but you have a growth in destinations like Dubai, Qatar, Oman of 7 and 8%. So in situations like this, there are temporarily and momentarily losers and winners, and we should be very careful about never generalizing in situations like this. But it is my duty also to alert you to the fact that all these positive trends and this bullish performance of this industry must also be seen in very cautious and careful light. There are still much risks around us, and particularly for us here in Europe, which represents, as I said, half of our global industry, if not more. And one of the most important things is still the uncertainty and volatility about economic news coming out of Europe. We're never so sure. We seem to be doing well, and then suddenly figures come out of France or Germany that we think are very solid economies that make us wonder sometimes about where we're heading and where we're going. This atmosphere of uncertainty is even worse than consistent bad news. And uncertainty has become almost a feature in heartland Europe. So this is a very, very serious situation. And in climates of uncertainty, travel suffers more. Even if we know that the news is bad from the economy, but we knew exactly what it is, we can start planning. Families plan for it, individuals and households plan for it. But when you don't know if tomorrow will bring a surprise or next week would be a layoff week for 10, 12% or 15% of the company that I am working in, that's very serious news. The second very important risk that we need to be very much aware of is employment. Our discussions and our data compiled with ILO, the International Labour Organization, indicate that the recovery of the labor market and the rates of employment will not take place in a very healthy way before 2014 or 2015. Europe has lost so many of its valuable jobs and very trained and very qualified personnel. And this is not only bad for the economy, it also reflects itself on social tensions and sometimes symptoms that the European society has not been accustomed to in terms of feeling frustrated and not knowing what to do. And I think you have seen some symptoms of that, not just in Spain, but in many, many parts of Europe. Who could have imagined that the youth of Spain, France, or the UK would feel doubly frustrated from those of Egypt, Syria, Libya, or Yemen, and take to the streets in more or less the same fashion that some of the youth in other parts of the world are, in spite of all these differences. I'm not saying that this is directly connected to unemployment, but it is definitely affected by the lack of clarity and prospects towards the future. The third and most very important risk that we have to look at is the apparent signs that are coming out of the commodity markets. There are very, very clear signs now, and we have been talking to IATA, the airline conglomerate, about the possibility of serious rise in the cost of transportation because of the serious rise in the cost of oil and food, for that matter. And we are very much expecting that the price of the barrel of oil would go up to the 110, 20, 30, 40, and maybe 50 as it was in 2007 and 2008. It did come up now, but all indications are that prices of commodities, particularly oil and food, are on their way up. The last risk that we should be very much aware of is that of the consequences of the austerity measures that are being now implemented by many countries, and I'm particularly now focusing on Europe. Austerity measures are necessary, but when governments find it very easy for them to tax the travel and tourism industry, just like they tax cigarettes or alcohol, because they look at it as if it is something that people can do and live without, which is a very, very big mistake. Travel and tourism now, travel in particular, has not only become a human need, it is a human right. Human beings have the right to go around. It is not just a luxury or a discretionary expenditure that I could do. I could quit cigarettes or not. I could drink less if I need to. But I don't think we should tell human beings, don't travel. Governments have been taxing travel because it's easy to tax it, and because it's still in the minds of many people connected to only those that can afford may do it. It's not really very necessary. Well, it is necessary. And it's not only necessary for the people that have the income and the money, it is necessary for all levels of income. People have the right to travel, they have the right to relax, to take time off. It's a human right. We are living in the 21st century, not in any Middle Age century anymore. And in that regard, we have seen very alarming signs. In the UK now, there is something called the Airport Departure Tax, APD they call it. If a family of 4 would want to travel from any UK airport to, let's say, Kenya or the Caribbean, the family would pay no less than 400 sterling pounds, about 550 euros, just on taxes from the airport before buying anything. And this has started from 2011. Germany and Austria are thinking of imposing taxes like this. Of course, the industry is shouting, but so what? Politicians say tourists don't vote. Why should we care? But what they should care about is the fact that voters need jobs, and tourism brings jobs. And this is our duty to try and connect taxing the travel and tourism industry to the loss of jobs and the devastation of the industry in that regard. If you add that to what will be imposed in 2012, correctly I must say, on the carbon pricing policy of the EU starting 2012, then the double taxation there and the temptation to impose even more taxes on the industry is a major, major risk. All of these factors, unemployment, the shaky economy, some of the political turbulence, and the unfair taxation, which is now also even seen as violating the World Trade Organization's Discriminatory Act, because tourism is an export. And when you impose unfair taxes like this, other countries can object. Imagine in the UK, if you travel to the Caribbean, you'd pay less, you pay more than if you travel to Hawaii, because the tax was designed in such a way that it says traveling from the capital city to the capital city. To the capital city in the US is Washington. So the Caribbeans that are so dependent on tourism will have to suffer more than the Hawaiians that the tax is designing the structure based on distances. So there are a lot of legal implications to this, and the alarming thing is that this is spreading in other European countries. I hope it never comes to Spain. I certainly hope so. Okay, now I come to the final part of my presentation, which is looking forward, and where will we be in the coming 10 years. Looking forward, one must say that we are definitely living in an ever-changing world. And just that's why the analysis and the forecast tends to be very complicated and very, very different. We are trying now to update our 2020 vision and plan that was issued 11, 12 years ago, and we're making it a 2030 plan. We're adjusting many, many of the issues that are there. But I have been left behind here, I'm sorry. Okay. Still, we can forecast the following. First of all, our industry will be closely linked to the economy. If the economy goes down, we will definitely be affected. However, we will always be one step better than other sectors, and we will always maintain this ability to lift up other sectors from some kind of depression. 2 days ago, when I was with Minister Miguel Sebastian and all the people from the ministry at our ethics conference in Reina Sofia Museum, when I was greeting him at the door, he looked at me and he said, "Well, your sector is the only good news that we're having in the Spanish economy nowadays." I was last week in Croatia, and the same thing was told to me by the Prime Minister of Croatia. She said, "Well, people are looking at tourism to lift the other sectors out of their depression." But still, if the economy goes down, we will go down. The second symptom of our forecast for the future is the shift in geopolitics. We believe that the center of gravity will continue to be in favor of the developing and the emerging destinations. This trend will continue. The strength of the BRICS is remarkable. And even the non-BRICS, the small countries that are coming up so strong now, will continue to be the case. And we are expecting that China, India, even Malaysia, Indonesia, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, even Kenya, and some of the pockets in East Africa, pending political stability there, will continue to be strong players. The third element in our forecast is the impact of growing awareness of sustainability and particularly climate change on our industry. If we do not prepare ourselves to a better integration between our industry, our sector, and the growing trends of focusing and emphasizing on responsible travel and responsible tourism, we will be left behind. Today, it is believed that our sector contributes to about 5% of the carbon footprint of the world. 2/3 of that is from transportation. But still, it's a 5% too many. 5% is not too much, but we are targeted. And particularly our transportation. People look, all what they have to do is lift their heads and look at the sky and see the white tail of any aeroplane and say, my God, how much they are polluting. The scientific facts are not exactly correct there, but the public perception about our contribution to pollution is going to be more and more determining our future, and therefore it is absolutely important that we present ourselves as not only a responsible sector, but the most responsible sector in this industry, so that we can be 2 steps ahead of what the public opinion, the people, awareness, and political leaders are going to be presenting us with. The fourth point that is definitely going to continue to affect us is technology. It's very important, as I said at the beginning, to be ahead of the game and to embrace all the technological changes and bend them and make them work for us. Technology, like media, like many other sectors, are very neutral in value, and therefore they are the property of the most intelligent, the most innovative, and the most creative. The fifth very important change that is happening is the demographic change. We are living in a very, very changing world. The world will very soon reach 7 billion people, and I assure you, in 10 to 15 years, they are all going to travel, every one of them, and every one of them will be crossing some kind of a border one time or another. Gone are the days where majority of the people of this world will live their entire life, and I must tell you this, you'll be sometimes shocked. We have evidence to prove that in 1950, only 60 years ago, 75% of the people of the world will spend their entire life in a circle of 100 kilometers. They would be born, they would live their entire life, and they would die in a circle of no more than 100 kilometers. Look what's happening today. So, the demographic change is going to affect us very much. And this demographic change also is spreading and opening up the demographic pyramid, so to speak. We have people living longer, healthier. There will be more entries into the travel market because people are still retiring at 60 and 62 in most of the countries of this world. And with the average expectancy of life now rising so incredibly, you will have more and more people traveling after they retire. And this is an excellent segment of the society because they have nothing else to fill their life with and they would like to enjoy it at the end. The pyramid is also opening up from the bottom. My 15, 16 years old daughter found her right to travel now. I think 10 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined to let her go alone to Punta Cana in Dominican Republic. She went there with her class and with her group, and she went there to see thousands and thousands and thousands of other young people that are traveling, backpackers, campers. These are new entries into the market that never were there before. The sixth, also very important pillar of our forecast is the impact of crises. Man-made crises, wars, terrorism, and all of the above, and natural crises on our industry. We have learned so much on how to adapt and deal with a crisis. The crisis in all its forms, and I say crisis with a capital C here, can and will affect and strike our industry at any time, and it has a devastating effect. If a pandemic breaks up, I was in Mexico last year when the H1N1 broke up. I went there, and the second day it was there, and we went there in a show of solidarity. It was devastating. Suddenly, it was switched off. Nobody comes to Mexico. Imagine that country that's so dependent on, and they had to make drastic measures. In 2-3 months, of course, they were able very bravely and very efficiently to recover back. But these crises can have devastating effects. So we need to equip ourselves and to prepare ourselves to manage these crises and bounce back very quickly. Media, information, how to talk to people, how to communicate with people is key in that regard. Finally, the last change that we're expecting to happen is the change in the consumer attitudes and patterns. People are not stupid anymore. People are becoming more educated, more informed, and nobody's going to fool anybody else. People know exactly where they're going, what they're doing. At the tip of their fingers, they can find out what is happening in Yemen, and should they go there or not. Or, I just brought Yemen because I'm from that part of the world, so I feel free not to be sensitive about it. These changes are directing different ways that our industry must be managed. Tourists are not going to accept anymore to be put every 35 to 30 in a bus, taken from one place to another, and stay in that bus and have the tour guide just pointing out at beautiful monuments outside of that bus and telling them, this is the Tour Eiffel, this is the Arc de Triomphe, and this is this and this is that. People now are changing in their attitudes to travel. They want to meet people, they want to interact, they want to taste the food, they want to be left alone, they want to feel their individual experience. This is something that is happening and will continue to happen, so we better prepare ourselves for it. These are some of the changes that we have come across, and I wanted to share them with you to alert you to where this industry is going. I would like to close on one thought that is of a personal nature here. Travel and tourism may be seen today as just one more sector, but in reality, the growth and the explosion of this human activity may prove to be in the future something much more serious than we think it is. I do not think that 300 years ago, the people that lived the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution realized that it is an industrial revolution, and that 200-300 years after that, people are going to talk about it and characterize it as a changing point in people's history. Today, there are sectors, tourism belongs to those sectors, that let's call them the new wave of service sectors, that are changing the way people live and are making up for the losses and the loss of dynamism and fatigue that is showing in other sectors, traditional sectors like agriculture, like manufacturing, like heavy industry, that are clearly tired now. Essential, but they are tired. And the new wave of sectors that I'm referring to are sectors like sports, tourism, culture, creative industries. These are changing our lives without us noticing. Look what 1 month of games in South Africa, just 1 month, 30 days, did to that country and to the entire continent. It is amazing. The entire image of the country has changed. The way people feel about life in that country has changed. The amount of jobs, the amount of money, income, and businesses that were created as a result and continue to be acting in the legacy of that event are a proof of that. Barcelona next to you is a very living example of that. I was in Beijing and did the Olympics, Shanghai, Montreal, Germany. Sports is becoming a big, big thing in our lives. Jobs, income, pride, connecting people, building understanding and building bridges. So is tourism. So is culture if we look at it as an industry. or any other creative arts. So, in that light, I'd like you to start thinking of the travel and tourism industry as probably the sector and the human activity for the future. Maybe, just maybe 100 years from now, somebody would be standing probably at the same place here and speaking about 2010 and 2020 as the age of travel and tourism. By this thought, I would close and thank you all and apologize for having taken more time than I have planned to take. It was a wonderful thing to be speaking to a distinguished group of people like you. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Taleb, for sharing with us your views about challenges and opportunities to tourism in the world. I think it was really interesting to listen to you. Things like, for example, that Europe gave a surprise, but we are to be very, very attentive, very careful about the next future, particularly also, I imagine, in Spain, our country. And also to see that tourism is a big opportunity for business all around the world, but also a field where we have to work a lot in order to keep our competitiveness. Okay, I think we have some time,
sure,
perhaps,
I'd be delighted.
only a few minutes for perhaps some questions from the audience.
You have to speak louder. I have a microphone, you don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've stated that in the last decade, millions of people have moved, and there's no way we can stop that, okay? But some of us think that the next big crisis won't be a financial one, but an energy one. So how about that? How about that scenario? How about adding millions of individual carbon footprints moving all around the world? How do you see that?
I think there are no two crises. This is one crisis. Both the economic crisis and the ecological crisis, if you say so, are one. They are really about how we use our resources. We fell into a deep economic crisis because we abused our financial resources. We lived beyond our means. We consumed much more than we are entitled to. We spent the money of our children and grandchildren. And we woke up suddenly in the last decade on the most serious ecological crisis for the same reason. We realized that we're consuming our environment at a much more higher rate than we have the right to. And we're eating up the oxygen of our children and grandchildren. So both are one. And I want to take the occasion of you asking this question to say this because it's something that's very important to link together. It has to do with our attitude about development and moving forward. Now, that does not mean that we should stop development. A financial crisis, an economic crisis, doesn't mean that we have to stop spending. And an ecological crisis does not mean that we have to stop traveling. The challenge is how to continue to do that, because it's our right to enjoy the world. And there are so many benefits on traveling. How to do that in a responsible and in an ethical and in the most conscious way possible. And human beings have been able to always come up with the right answer to the right solution. The important thing is our consciousness and awareness. Even if there is an energy crisis, but the energy crisis was because of our pattern of behavior. You know, we were talking about carbon footprints with regard to tourism, and we said about 3% of the carbon footprint of the world is from aeroplanes. 5% is the entire travel and tourism industry. But with advanced technologies in how to make aeroplanes and cars and ships more energy efficient, we can reverse this. Cars. You know, many people are so unfair about how they judge the airline industry. Actually, the airline industry in the last 20 years has done great advancement in energy efficiency. If you look at the aircrafts 20 years ago and the aircrafts now, it's night and day. Cars, on the other hand, have not done that. We have not, and until now, most of travel is done by cars, in spite of all what we're talking about. So what we should be pushing for is innovation and aggressive research in how to make our life more responsible. The answer to the energy crisis is not to stop development. This is devastating. This is a defeatist attitude to say, in order to reduce carbon footprint, we should stop development. 80% of the carbon footprint of the world is coming out of cities. Do we stop living in cities? We can't do that. We have to continue about life, but we have to do it in the way that human beings have been doing it best, intelligence and innovation.
Sustainable tourism. And what interests me is also, it's not just the environmental side. You've mentioned the economic side, the idea of poverty reduction. Now, you've talked about developing countries. You've talked about the right to travel. I don't see many Tanzanian tourists. I don't see many tourists from Chad or Madagascar. If we're going to change that, if everyone in this globalized world that we live in is going to have the right to do this, to exercise this right to travel, my concern is, how are we going to use tourism to enable them to do that? To reduce poverty, to get local communities engaged in a way that is much more participatory. I travel a lot, for example, in Africa, and what shocks me is the enclave tourism. It's looking outward, or it's connected to certain groups in society, but the trickle-down effect is incredibly limited. How can we avoid that? What can we do to change this?
You're absolutely correct, and you're touching on a very important thing. But let me answer it in a different way, and you have to forgive me. I'm optimist by nature. So if I exaggerate a little bit, take what I say with a little bit of caution. Who could have imagined 10 years ago, not 20 or 30 years ago, that the Indians are going to be some of the best travelers in the world? Today they are. Today, people are fighting to get the Indians as a source market. Brazil grew in 2010, the outbound market grew at 52%. Who could have imagined that the Chinese would be the best travelers in the world? I mean, you and I know the second part of the 20th century. We always thought of China as China. So with the improvement, especially with the enlargement of the middle class in many of these societies, they become very good travelers. And actually, they become excellent travelers. I tell you, the average expenditure of a Brazilian, a Russian, a Chinese, or an Indian is 1.4 more than the average expenditure of a European. They're very good travelers. Now, they're still a small portion of the overall society because the middle class has not grown that much. But just to go back to Africa, because I travel a lot into Africa. Africans they are at a stage now where they need to connect with Europe in the direction of Europeans going to Africa. This is the stage. And by Europeans and North coming to the South, there are jobs created, there is income generated, and there is interaction between the people. We have a very, very important program at UNWTO called the STEP program, STEP, Sustainable Tourism for the Elimination of Poverty. And it does precisely that. It goes to these developing countries and try to introduce some small projects that would help generate income, train some people, build a little information center, train a group of young people in a remote village in Ethiopia on how to use the internet to advertise and attract more people to their community, and so on and so forth. But the surprising trend, I was in Kenya last June, and there was a big African meeting after our executive council. And one of the African tour operators was standing in the meeting and said something that struck me in the face. He said, when should we Africans stop thinking of tourists only in terms of those that are white and have blue eyes? because what he was saying, we're getting more money and there are more numbers of Africans traveling inside Africa than we ever thought. Because the discussion was how to attract more tourism. So this tour operator was standing and saying, are you really conscious that you can get better travelers from Namibia now, from South Africa, from some of Mozambique, Angola? So it's a process that takes time. But what we need to acknowledge now is that tourism is a function of development, and that better, more managed, and healthier growing travel and tourism industry can definitely contribute to the development, economic and social development of any country.
More questions? No more questions from the audience? So, Taleb, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Presence today here was absolutely a pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Gracias a todos.